Good morning and welcome to another and rather belated Chip Chat. And today we're going to be talking about the idea of gaming and where gaming is heading. And with me to discuss that, I have Grant from OvertheEdge and Count Frakula from GameCast, among other things. And before we get started, usual thing, I'll just get these guys to introduce themselves and then we'll move into the subject at hand. So, Count, do you want to go first? Do you want to tell us where we can find you?
Okay. I'm a member of GameCast. I am now one of the overseers after we had a bit of a restructuring. So I do probably too much stuff over there, arguably. Most of it being news-related stuff. I do a lot of news videos, I do a news podcast, and I'm currently doing a Sims series, which is quite fun. I'm just sort of doing a fly on the wall, watching the people I made the GameCast crew in the Sims. It's quite fun. I'm enjoying it. And you can also find me on Twitter at Snowy Duffield for political opinions, which you may or may not enjoy.
I think I probably would, but I'm not sure everyone would.
No.
And you, Grant?
Right, my name's Grant. I run a channel called OvertheEdge. I recently pretended to stop making videos about video games, but I've started again. So you can also find me on Twitter at OvertheEdgeYT. Yeah, I do everything from looking at the sort of other side of video games, just like narrative and pacing, story, things like that. And also I do PC help videos and technical videos as well. So that's where you can find me. My channel is just called OvertheEdge.
Cool.
There you go.
Cool. So I will do the usual thing and I'll put a link in the description. So if any of you guys want to go and check these guys out, and I suggest you do, just go and have a look at that and you can find them. But in the meantime, we've got this subject to talk about. And basically, as I say, what I want to talk about today is gaming and where it's heading. And the reason I want to talk about that is because there's been a lot of stories recently that have been breaking that I think are linked in some way. We've had stuff with the games industry, insiders talking about the way in which gamers expect too much. We've had loot boxes, we've had cross-play, games as service, and I do think all these things tie into one another. I think in some respects the game industry is more at odds now with its fans, with its customers, than it has been for, well, some considerable time, maybe ever. And I just don't know what's driving that. I don't understand why it is that we've got an industry where the customers are almost seen as the enemy, and some of the customers seem to think that they almost own the product. So there's this butting of heads that goes on. And then within that, we've also got the element of greed within the industry that comes into play as well and gets people fired up and gives them a really good reason to get annoyed with the industry. And I'm certainly one of those. And I know Grant and Count are as well. So that having been said, I just wondered what you two guys think about this. And do you think that the industry's at odds with the fans? Do you think that, you know, we're in a difficult place at the moment, and do you have any ideas of what maybe we can do about it? And, you know, look at things like loot boxes and cross-play and games as a service, and where you think they're going, how you think that they may, you know, affect us moving forward, both positively and negatively. So who wants to take that one first?
I'll try. There's a bit of a pushback, I think, at the moment. I don't know if this is a transition period or not, but there's a couple of things going on. You've got the whole issue of microtransactions, where games companies are trying to leverage extra revenue because they're so scared of putting the price up of a $60 game. I don't know what's unique about the games industry, but every other industry or every other sort of capitalist market has had price increases for X amount of time, but the games industry doesn't want to go beyond the $60 model for games. But on the other hand, you've got issues where gamers expect X amount for their money. So they expect a $60 game to last X amount of time. If you think about it, whatever industry do you get so much value from a $60 product? So you've got a couple of things happening. you got publishers treating gamers just like revenue streams. So you've got them pushing microtransaction models and seeing what they can get away with. They're testing the waters, and they did it last year with Battlefront and what happened there. There was pushback, but if you look, we're still getting things like the FIFA model. Nobody seems to complain about that. Every year FIFA seems to sell X amount and probably will do a stupid amount of revenue through their pack system.
Well, EA are refusing.
You say that, there's a lot of kickback on FIFA 19 this year, I've heard.
There is more than there has been, but people are still buying it in like ridiculous. It's still going to shoot to number 1 in the charts, but will it sell less this year because of the pushback? I guess
somebody said to me that they thought that the pushback was from a vocal minority of like YouTubers and people like that, and that most gamers weren't bothered. And I don't know, because I see what's happening with the various bodies that are now looking into things like loot boxes, and we've had this thing with EA where they're refusing in Belgium to remove loot boxes, and now there's a court case, or it looks like there's going to be a court case. And so I don't quite know what's going on now. I don't know whether there is a mass of gamers that are looking at this, or whether it's just people like us. But it certainly has crossed over to some degree into more mainstream media. You're seeing stories now in more mainstream press. And there was a talk the other day about there might be a TV program looking at, and this is slight aside, but CEX, and looking at the way they're possibly exploiting gamers with their fake covers and stuff like this. So I do think that on a broad sense, the more mainstream media does seem to be taking note, and that can only be a good thing, I think. I don't know what you guys think on that.
Yeah, I think definitely there's a lot to do with that. I think at the moment we're seeing a lot of customer pushback against a lot of the shittier things, but a lot of the time, I don't know, some of the things that people, if you don't view it as a big enough issue, then people get away with it, like CEX. Like, I know you really cared about it, and I care about it. Maybe not as much as you, but I care about it.
Well, in the grand scheme of things, it's quite minor when you compare it to something like the billions that EA and 2K make from loot boxes. So
yeah, but we had the same with standard microtransactions became so normal and benign that everyone was just like, oh well, whatever, that's fine. They're just there now, instead of going, well, no, we don't want these here.
Yeah, well, the thing that gets me is I hear people saying, it's they're using a free to play model, but it's not free to play. And I actually was one of the few people that, well, in my own head, I don't know if anyone else thinks this, but I would actually think that the free to play model is problematical in things like phone gaming and stuff, because loot boxes and pay to win is absolutely right through that industry. And
well, you're trying to force a pay to win model, a free to play model in when you've already paid for the game. It's like,
but I actually think it's worse than that, because I think even in a free to play game, if you're asking people to pay in order to progress through the game, or in order to do better in the game, then it's pay to win. And I don't care whether it's free to play or whether it's a $60 game. Pay to win is still pay to win. And
pay to win is just wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just ridiculous.
And all that's happened is we've seen that model come across from the free to play games on mobile, and people like EA, and although they've been doing it for longer than most, Activision, all these different big companies now that are putting out $60 games, have seen it as another revenue stream that they can shoehorn into their games. But it started before they got hold of it in some ways. I just think I have this idea in my head that maybe cosmetic elements are okay as long as it's not loot boxes. That's the kind of line I draw here. Not pay to win, and not loot boxes. But if it's not gambling and it doesn't affect gameplay, then I haven't got too much of a problem with it personally. But
I don't either. I played a lot of Overwatch, and you'll see people in like Jim Sterling say that Overwatch's model is wrong as well, but I don't personally agree with that.
I think it could be better.
It could be better, but it's still completely.
I remember when it came out, when they had a breakdown of if you didn't pay, it would take about, like, what was it, 2,000 hours or some ridiculous number to statistically be likely to unlock everything.
They had to change it, so you basically always got items you didn't have. But that wasn't the case at first. Like you said, it was completely.
Have they changed that? Okay, so they've changed it so you can't get duplicates now.
Yeah, well, you can still get duplicates. You're much less likely to, though.
But doesn't that come down to the?
That's where it bugs me. That's the problem with it. You can still get duplicates, and it's the amount you get for the duplicate is so insignificant.
Oh yeah, it's like 5 or something. I don't know.
I think it's like 10% of the actual like coin value of thing. Yeah. That's madness. I'm sorry. I
haven't played for a while, but they did change the system. But yeah, it wasn't.
It could still be improved. You should not be any cosmetic system like that. Any system like that, you should not be able to get duplicates, because that is where the exploitation comes
I'd agree with that, actually. And I think it ultimately comes back to this thing about, gamers and the industry and how they interact with one another. And I think what we want as gamers is we want value for money, and we also want to know what we're paying for. So and increasingly all this stuff, I hear so many people, and I don't know whether this is a generational element, but I hear so many gamers now who say, oh, it's not pay to win, it's a choice. You don't have to pay to buy this thing. Well, but that's what you're saying there is you're making my argument for me when you say something like that, because the very idea that you can choose to pay for something that gives you an advantage or not choose to pay for something that gives you an advantage means it is by its very definition pay to win. And it beggars belief for me that anyone would defend that. It's indefensible.
The common argument when they go, oh, it's just a choice, is when people say, oh, well, people don't have as much time as they used to nowadays.
Tough shit.
One, if you're going to buy a game, you're probably going to give yourself the time to finish it. And even if you don't have all the time in the world, which I don't for things like Spider-Man, I don't care. I'm not going to want to speed it along. I just play it a bit slower than everyone else. Two, if you really wanted to complete it quickly, there used to be a thing, they were called cheats, Do you remember those?
I remember those.
And they gave you just like advantages and they were free in the game. Do you remember those? Yeah, exactly. Come on.
Do you think this is... I was thinking this when Grant was speaking a bit earlier, and do you think this is related to people's obsession, both within the industry and within the gaming community itself, this obsession with content? This idea that, that game doesn't take 100 hours, therefore it's not value for money.
It's worthless. It's that game. A lot of people said it about Portal, the original Portal, amongst many other games, because Portal is a 2-hour game. And they're like, it's rubbish. It only takes 2 hours. Yeah, it's some of the best 2 hours you'll have of your life, though. Playing
brilliant, and that's the thing, isn't it?
Narrative games. Yeah, Yeah. Last year we had Edith Finch. That's 2 hours long.
Yeah,
that won best game at the BAFTA.
One of the best games of the year, if not the best game of the year.
It's not about this idea of quality over quantity. This argument. I think the problem is a few years ago we had this trend where everyone was making open world games. So because they had this idea, it's probably the Ubisoft model that you had to just cram a map full of icons because you didn't get value for money otherwise.
They're still doing this, really. But the open world game became the default setting that the third-person shooter was, or the first-person shooter was last generation.
Yeah.
Because last generation, everyone was copying Call of Duty, and now everyone's copying, name an open world game. Assassin's Creed, probably, or Far Cry. All copying those.
But
that just happens. So there's a point. What's going to be the next sort of ubiquitous game, the default game? What's going to be the next one?
This was going to be kind of my next question is if you you've kind of segued into it very well. Blimey, we almost sound professional. Almost, not quite, but almost.
Don't get too far.
But I mean, if you look at what's going on with open world games, and I look at those, and they're still very popular, and it drives me nuts because I can't complete these games, and there's only so many you can do in a year. But I just look at that model, and I see it almost now morphing towards that games as service idea, And I think we're heading more and more in that direction now. And I don't know what you make of that, because I'm not that keen on games as service, because it seems to me that we're going to end up with the same sort of open world idea, but it's going to be always online, and it's going to be a situation where the game's going to release. There's going to be no content at the beginning, and then they're going to just keep giving us more content and adding content as time goes on. And it's all this thing about content. What about story and all these other things that are important to me? Because content means nothing if it's devoid of meaning.
I'm sorry, but you're insignificant if you like story, according to the games industry. multiplayer.
Yes, because it's about the money, and that's the problem again.
Single player is dead, everybody.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah, tell that to Sony.
How dare you want story, narrative, pacing, and all sorts of other things in your games? But the games as a service. When you look at the Destiny model,
and that's the one that's driving it. I think Destiny's.
I mean, is that the new de facto? Is that what we're going to be heading towards? Ubiquitous kind of model for the gaming industry now that once open world becomes less trendy, or even. I suppose it's a case that when Ubisoft finally move away from that model, then we'll know for sure that we've moved on, because they seem to base every game on the same model.
But if you look at the moves from, not so much Nintendo because they're a kind of outlier, but if you look at the moves from Xbox and PlayStation, PlayStation with their PlayStation Now, Xbox with Game Pass, it looks increasingly like, especially Microsoft, I think they're far too close to EA on this, I think. This drive towards games as service, and that to me it worries me a little bit, because I do think that it's very much like this open world thing. They're selling us something, but it's not driven by gamers, and we've been told for so long now that single player's dead, nobody wants single player. Well, that's self-evidently not true. But we're getting it now with games of service, and I think we're going to be increasingly seeing that we're going to be told that games as service are the way to go, and that's how you get your value for money, and you will pay for this up front every month, and these games will drop. You get something like Sea of Thieves. I think I said this in a video some months ago. Something like Sea of Thieves drops. If you're paying full price for Sea of Thieves, you're going to complain because there's nothing in it when you get it. Story-wise, anything, however you want to cut it. But if you're paying $7.99 or whatever it is for Game Pass every month, and Sea of Thieves drops, you're like, oh, okay, I'll dip in, I'll have a look at that, and it changes your relationship to the game.
Changes the way you value
exactly,
games,
yeah. And I think in a way it there's a danger of it devaluing games, Yeah. And we saw this happen with music, where music sales have gone down, and I worry that it may not affect sales necessarily. Well, it affects sales because people won't be buying games; they'll be in effect renting them. But I just wonder if people will have the same love for games that they've had in the past, if that's the way the model is, because it's going to be very much a throwaway commodity rather than something you cherish. I mean, what do you guys make of that? Maybe I'm completely mad on that, but that's just that's the worry for me anyway.
I don't think you're mad saying that. I think it's a valid concern, because if you look at something like Game Pass, I mean, it's obvious Microsoft want to adopt the Netflix model, but does it necessarily apply to games? And also, you're talking about how it devalues games. The way I see it is, if I buy a game for $60 or £50, whatever it is, I want to get value out of that game. If I'm looking at a list of games in like a Game Pass and I'm paying $7.99 a month, I'm not seeing those games in the same way. And if Horizon 4 has gone straight onto Game Pass, and the way I think, well, I don't actually think that's good for the game as well.
No, because it might hurt the overall sales, because people just go, just get it on Game Pass, I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, They can massage the sales figures as well by saying, "Oh, X amount of people are playing it on Game Pass." It's not the same as actual physical sales, is it?
Or they can go, "Oh, we've had X amount of Game Pass subscriptions this month. We've had an uptake because of this amazing game." That's the only sort of way they could positively spin it properly. And
again, you're not getting, like now with all the loot boxes and everything. When you're getting a game on Game Pass or whatever service it might be, you're not actually getting the full game, because that's the kind of loss leader, if you like. You're being brought in with your $7.99 a month, and
then you got to pay for all the expansions, guys. The deluxe content, the stuff that was gated off at launch day for no good reason.
Exactly right. So they've got your $7.99, and then how much more money are you paying on top? And in the end, you could end up spending a lot more than, say, $60 if you just go out and buy a game. But having said that, no game is actually $60 now anyway, because if you want the full game, I agree with Jim Sterling on this, most games now, they release with a season pass. If you want the full game, it's more like $100 quite often.
Yes.
Yeah.
They use it to claim that they've never upped the $60 price tag, guys. They would never do such a thing.
But if you want the full game, here's all the add-ons. I mean,
if you want everything else that we've arbitrarily cut out of the game, pay us extra money, and while you're at it, go to a specific retailer, to get the missions that we gave them for no reason.
Yeah.
Content.
Talk about breaking up the player base. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Wasn't the worst example of that Battlefront, the first Battlefront, where they basically held back Liddy like over half the game for the season pass?
Pretty much, yeah. Or when you got Ubisoft, you need a flowchart to work out what you're getting with each bloody
for crying out loud. The Ultimate Edition, and then the Ultimate Edition. With,
the Ultimateur Edition.
With, the one with the cherry on the top's the one you want. But actually, no, because then there's one with cream as well. Oh, Jesus Christ. It's ridiculous.
You thought all those versions of the original Doom were like final ultimate Doom. No, it really is the
but at least
there's no more Doom, honestly. We've got all of it now. Oh no, there's a bit more Doom.
But at least they were linear. At least they came out with Doom, and then there was a little break, and then if you hadn't bought it initially, you could go out and buy Final Doom or whatever it was. Whereas this, it's like they drop them all at once, and you've got all these different versions, and now you've even got versions coming out of games where you've got the kind of collector's edition of the game, and it doesn't have the game in it. And then you hear people like, I mean, I like Phil Spencer, but then Phil Spencer says something like, I think it was Phil Spencer, it might be one of the other Xbox guys, saying, this was about a year ago, saying something along the lines of, yeah, but a lot of people may just want to have the digital copy.
They buy the game digitally and then not want the game. Yeah, but why are you calling it a collector's edition when it's not an edition of the game? It's an addition.
It's like the tat edition. It's the let's give the useless tat in a box edition.
I don't mind them actually selling all that stuff. I don't have a problem with that necessarily, as long as they don't claim that it's collector's edition of anything.
Well, it's nothing directly to do with the game, because there's no bloody game in it, is there?
Yeah, just call it some We Happy Few merchandise or some fucking Call of Duty merchandise or something.
Well, the thing is, I'm a bit of a sucker for merchandise anyway, and if they did that, I may be more inclined to buy it. But when they're selling it as the special edition of the game, or the Ultimate Edition, or Collector's Edition, or the Collector's Special Ultimate Edition, or whatever they want to call it, and then there's no game in it, that actually puts me off buying it rather than making me want to buy it, if that makes sense. Whereas if they were up front and said, look, this is not the game, this is just some tie-in to the game, I'd be like, oh yeah, cool, that'd be like, that bit of crappy plastic will look good on my shelf because I'm a mug. But at least I don't...
Let's call it the This Is Not the Game edition.
Yeah.
But,
game not included.
Oh man, I mean, and I can see that's something I can see we're going to get more and more of, because with things like Game Pass and PS Now, these things are only going to become more common, and EA are going into this as well. They're spending a lot of money on looking into a streaming service. So we're going to increasingly get a situation where you're going to in effect rent your games, and then they're going to be having these special editions that you can go and buy on top of that. I think we're going to see a lot more of that, and
I think it's inevitable. I mean, haven't EA changed to that premium Origin model now?
Yeah.
Where they charge
Yeah,
you
they
$14.99
had
a month.
Origin Access, and now they have a weird thing where you get all of the EA games that you definitely want. All of those EA games that I can definitely think of that are worth the
which
money.
then they'll sell you loot boxes as well and season passes on top.
And all the expansion.
Yeah, and
you get the Sims 4, but you don't get any of the expansions.
Yeah.
Probably something like
10
that.
hours of Battlefield or whatever. Yeah, it's really worth $14.99 a month.
Do you think this all this stuff, because we're all sitting here, we're all moaning about all these things, but do you think that this plays a part in the attitude that gamers have towards the industry? Because for me it feels like, whether it's true or not, I think with some companies more than others, it feels like they're taking the piss. It feels like they're just trying to exploit us and get as much money out of us, and that leaves a bad feeling, and then it makes people more likely to go and have a go at developers and go onto Twitter and some people can't control the way they go about things, and they don't understand the difference between having a moan about an issue and actually attacking an individual. And the demographic within gaming is still quite young, and a lot of people, let's be honest, a lot of gamers are quite infantile in many respects. God, I'm going to get attacked for saying that. You're proving my point if you attack me for saying that.
Nice.
But so they overreact, but there is a genuine reason behind it for me in many respects, in many cases.
But you've got to be able to criticize it.
Yeah, I think half the time that they overreact to maybe the wrong things.
Yeah. I agree.
I think it's like, I've said it before, it's like being hosed down with warm shit and told to feel grateful for the fact that you're getting hosed down with warm shit and stop complaining about it. It's not like, you need to be able to criticize the industry without, like you say, you're not singling out necessarily individuals.
Yeah, and obviously some people do, but
industry practices that you don't agree with.
Yeah.
So you've got to be allowed to do that with a free voice without feeling like, you're just being negative, as some people say, just being negative about our precious gaming.
Just let us enjoy the games that have been hacked to pieces.
Yeah.
But when, we had this with Jessica Price, didn't we, where she went after the fan who, for my money in that particular instance, and I'm sure that's not always the case, but in that particular instance, the guy
gave his own opinion on a subject that she weighed in on.
It was very genuine, and I read the whole strand, the whole thread, and I know
it's a really sort of like pleasant. He was just going, "Oh, that's I respect your opinion. This is what I think," and then she was just like,
yeah, and maybe. I personally, in that particular instance, I think Jessica Price was basically slightly nuts. But maybe you could see a situation where that was just the tipping point, where you get this with my kids. Sometimes he'll do a few things that really, really annoy me, and then he'll do something quite innocuous, and I'll snap to the thing that's quite innocuous just because my pressure level has got to a point where it's about to blow. And you could maybe see this within the gaming industry. These guys are under an immense amount of pressure. The studios often treat their developers like crap. And then we come along and we're going, your work's shit. We don't say it. We wouldn't say it in quite so many words. We might be a bit more polite about it than that. But, you could see that sometimes the developer may, snap at the end of it. But I at the end of the day, for me, I think that when someone turns around and starts having a go at the fans, they're maybe having a go at the wrong people, because it's the suits, if you like, the publishers and the pressures that are being put on them that is the problem. We're being told as gamers to expect so much content and all this stuff, and then these developers are being told you have to shoehorn all this in and you have to work all these hours to do it. I'm not sure it's sustainable.
Yeah, the Telltale thing is a good example of that. They had people working until like 3 a.m. on the day that they were actually they were laid off, and then a few hours later it was like, see ya, off you go. It's like the problem isn't the fans. The problem is they probably can't direct their anger at their bosses because they're not allowed to say things publicly or privately. So the fans will get will get it in the neck, when really they're not the people, like you say, who should be getting the brunt of this sort of criticism, or in the case of Jessica Price, sort of losing the plot.
How in that case then the next question is how do we as fans, and we're quite low level, we're not big YouTubers or anything, but how do we as fans and YouTubers and commentators, how do you build bridges with the industry, especially when the industry, maybe not the developers themselves, certainly not the individual guy working in his booth, but the industry as a whole seems to treat the fans to a certain extent with disdain. When we're being told by EA, Activision, and all these companies that this is what we want, while we're yelling into a vacuum that actually we want something else. And I know there are people out there who want loot boxes and stuff, but frankly they're addicts. I'm sorry, but if you think that loot boxes is a good way of playing a game, then you haven't looked at games properly. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But I don't know, how do we build bridges? How do we make it so that this kind of toxicity that seems to be building within the industry, how do we get rid of that, and how do we move forward in a much more positive way? I think there are some strands. I mean, I think the moves within trying to bring disabled gamers in and stuff like that, I think they're very positive moves, and I think there are some good initiatives within the industry with things like that. And inclusivity is always a good idea. But there does seem to be this element of us and them within the industry, and I really don't know how we can get past that.
Yeah, I feel the only way at the end of the day that the average Joe can remotely influence the games industry is to speak with your wallet. I mean, that's all we can do. We're not big influencers. We're not, we haven't got hundreds of thousands of people watching our videos or anything like that, or any sort of games industry person watching our videos going, oh shit, they don't like our game or whatever else. So all you can do is speak with your wallet. When you're talking about the inclusivity, the things like Microsoft's their big fuck off access controller, I can't remember what it's called, but it's really cool. Things like that it's a really great thing, and it makes you want to go, oh, it's one of those things that makes you go, oh, I quite like Microsoft then, I quite like what they're doing. So, I don't know, maybe you're more likely to buy a system or a game or something from them because they're doing good things.
Yeah.
Whereas I've been less tempted to buy PS4 games while Sony was being shitty about the whole crossplay situation.
Yeah, and that's another one, isn't it? I mean, that's good news this week. I mean, I don't know where Sony are looking to go with that, whether they are. They have said, I think they've said
they're using Fortnite as a trial to see how it works and how well it can work with other games.
Yeah, I mean, what do you guys think on that? I mean, that's another one moving forward. I see that as potentially a phenomenal development. I think this is like a tap dripping at the moment. I think we're just getting Fortnite, but I think, excuse me, I'm bashing my microphone. I think as we move forward, the idea, for me, the idea of cross-play coming in the future to all cross-platform games, or a large number of cross-platform games, is a really positive thing and a real positive move forward. I know Phil Spencer's been talking about this a long time, and I always do wonder when you hear an industry insider talking about a new initiative what the ulterior motive is, because I'm a cynic like that. But I do think that it's a positive thing. And when he talks about, when you go out and buy a CD or whatever, you can play that music on any CD player. And the idea that you can, and I know we're not going to get it to that extreme. You're not going to just be able to go out and buy a game and whatever format it is will work in the Xbox or the PlayStation or the Switch. That's simply not going to happen. But increasing the ability to play with each other across different platforms, as far as I can see, at this stage at least, I can't see the downside to that.
Well, there isn't a downside really, is there? But I don't know. I'm probably going to get it in the neck for saying this, but I don't think it's as big a deal as people make out. Yes, it's good that Fortnite, because it's the biggest game in the world, it should be played across all platforms. Really, I mean, you can't argue against that. I mean, it's Sony were just sort of
digging their heels in.
They're digging their heels and they're being ridiculous over it, and I think they know that because they've given into the pressure. But I really think they won't stretch it to that many games. You will get crossplay across a certain amount of games, but they'll still want to control their own ecosystem, and that's really because they're the market leader. But they know that they could be ousted as the market leader in the next generation because we're coming near the end of this console cycle. I think they're a little concerned that if public opinion sways against them, you could end up with a reverse situation where, the next console cycle they're not the market leader because they're seen as this kind of like company that doesn't want to offer gamers anything in terms of being able to play with friends on different platforms. So it's good, it's a good thing, and they really weren't in a very good position from a PR perspective, and they know that as well.
Yeah, I think one possible way that this could end up alright is it could encourage more in terms of how good each console is as a console, because when you've got less to think about when it comes to having, you can play our game with people on other platforms. That encourages then the platform holders to go, well, what's going to make them want to play on our platform specifically? What can we do to make our platform the best place to play game X, Y, Z?
It really is. We hear all this word almost like a refrain throughout the industry of choice. But this really is something that could give gamers real choice, because if you've got most of the multiplats, and I agree with Grant, I'm not sure how much of this we're going to see. I do think that moving forward into the next generation, we may see a lot more of this, and I hope we do. But if you get to a situation where most of the multi-platform games are cross-play, then I agree with you, Count. I think you end up in a situation where people will say, if we look at the current consoles, if you've got all those games that go across the different platforms, you will look at the different platforms and you'll make your choice based on what's important for you. So you might look at Sony and you'll say, well, actually, they've got the best exclusives, so I can play all the multi-platform games with all my Xbox friends and my Switch friends. It's going to be in the next gen, but that kind of idea. Or, you can look at the Xbox and say, well, Xbox is the most powerful console, so I'm not really bothered about Sony's exclusives, though why you'd say that I don't know. But anyway, I'm not bothered about Sony's exclusives, but I just want to play multi-plats, so I want the most powerful console, so I'll get that. Or you may say, I prefer to play on the go, and, the Switch is the most convenient console for me. So in that instance, you really are opening it up to people to be able to make a choice about which platform they prefer, and I can only see that as a positive.
They're going to do that anyway, though, aren't they? I mean, it's like, why do you prefer one console over the other? Is it because of the exclusives? Is it because it's more powerful, etc.? That's still going to apply, but you've got this added factor.
It's not the be all and end all. I agree with you there. I mean, it's not. Some people over-egg the pudding on this and make too much of it, especially as at this stage it's like one game. But I think it's going to become more. I think it's going to become more relevant moving forward, and that's for me. That's the holy grail. Is the all cross-platform. It's not going to happen. I agree with you there, but at least we may get a significant number.
Yeah, I think the fact that it's happening just a little bit is the movement. Well, I didn't expect it to happen.
Well, I was expecting it to happen eventually, but I thought it would be later rather than sooner.
Yeah.
So I was.
Exactly. It's good. Yeah. It's good for people to play Fortnite. It's very good. Yeah, because it's a massive game. So.
Yeah, and
And now the PS4 players have probably 4 times the audience that they can play with, so they're less likely to have a queue.
Yeah, exactly. It benefits us as gamers, and if I look to things like Rocket League and games like that, they lend themselves perfectly to crossplay. And my kids, I mean, in some ways it kind of takes away the kind of banter that you have with your mates about my console's better than you. But then again, that becomes toxic because people get older anyway because they can't let go of it. But the idea of, my kid being able to sit down, he prefers the Xbox controller. He doesn't like the PS4 controller. And I've tried to say, look, there's not much difference. You get used to both of them, but he won't have it. He wants to play the Xbox because he prefers the controller. Likes some of the games on the PlayStation, but prefers the Xbox controller. And so he wants to play, Fortnite or Rocket League with his friends, but he wants to play on the Xbox. Now his cousin's on the Xbox, but some of his friends are on the PlayStation. Well, you remove that impediment, Yeah. So.
Yeah, I remember. It was particularly Rocket League's developers when, this was a few years ago, they had a thing about crossplay, and they were going, well, it's Sony that are being the blockade here. It's only it's a matter of us flicking effectively flicking a switch and going, yes, you can do this.
Didn't they do it by accident once?
They did, yes. They did it by accident for a
they
day.
showed exactly that was true. It's just a case of flicking a switch.
Having said that, did you hear? I think I haven't watched it yet, but I think Young did a video about Bethesda and how they'd made a big thing about Fallout 76.
Yes, they're saying Fallout 76 is not crossplay because reasons.
Yeah, exactly. It's like they blame Sony, but now it's like
you can't really blame Sony anymore.
I mean, maybe they could, because Sony's still Sony, even though they've done it with Fortnite. But I think
I'm sure it's got nothing to do with the fact that the beta's on Xbox One week earlier.
Yeah, well, PS4. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and this is another thing. I find it quite tiring that you're constantly having to look behind the curtain to see what the real motivation is for these things, and that to me does go to the whole issue here about where we're going with gaming and how we can get over this. And I know, look, the reality is these are big companies. They want to make money. They want to expand, all the rest of it. But in the industry like this, in an industry where it's entertainment and people become very invested in the products, you can't treat it like a lot of other industries. It's not like going out and buying bedding or going out and buying some gravel for your drive. Nobody gives a shit about that stuff. They just need it. But with this stuff, people get invested, and so the companies need to understand that when people are buying games, they're kind of buying into an idea as much as a product, and trying to fleece them is not helping, and trying to push them in directions they don't want to go is not helping. And I know there's always people who will go in whatever direction they're pushed because, well, some people don't speak English or whatever. Yeah, exactly. It's and they'll do whatever they're told. You've only got to look in America and Trump. Sorry, American friends, but well, you've only got to look in this country and Brexit. I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah, let's not go down that minefield because there's been some annoying stuff about that all the time.
Yeah, we could do a whole podcast about that, and that would go on for about 4 hours.
Probably not wise on this gaming channel.
Probably not. No, exactly. No. So I think there's positive shoots within the gaming industry. I think there's some things to look forward to. I mean, I'm certainly looking forward to the next generation and seeing what we get there. But I'm also there's a certain amount of trepidation there as well about I don't know how the companies are going to deal with the fallout from loot boxes. I know that EA are digging their heels in. And that one's going to run and run, I think. I don't think we've seen the last of loot boxes yet. And if EA by some, if they manage some way to win against the Belgian authorities, then you'll see all the other companies piling back on again. So it's a difficult one. I don't know how we can move forward with this. I mean, again, what would your guy? I mean, we're getting towards the end of this now. What would be your If you had to say whether you think it's positive or negative and why, what would be your kind of what would you come away with from this? How would you feel?
there are positives in the gaming industry. I mean, the technology continues to amaze. Games are technically amazing now. I'm really impressed. I've been impressed by stuff this year. God of War, Spider-Man, all have impressed me. Detroit Become Human, even. So the technical ability of developers to sort of push hardware continues to amaze. Just going back earlier to what we were saying about how do we deal with these negative aspects of the gaming industry? Well, you can vote with your wallet. I've found a lot of amazing indie stuff this year on PC that and indie companies that are just doing their own thing because they can afford to do it, and they're giving us games which are pushing boundaries. And we need companies to keep pushing boundaries, just genre boundaries, not just technically. Because in the AAA market, you expect them to do that, really, especially platform exclusives, because they generally are technically better than a lot of multi-platform games because they have longer to develop them. They do on the Sony side, not necessarily on Microsoft. They tend to cancel them after a while.
Sorry, got that knife out.
I don't mean I've got nothing against Microsoft. I know. Honestly.
Poor scale bound.
Don't hate me in the comments. But there are positives, but there's not a lot of them at the moment. There's things in, we've mentioned accessibility, and we've mentioned things where we haven't yet mentioned it, but PlayStation Classic, and we don't really want to be cashing in on nostalgia just because the current state of the industry isn't particularly positive. But you've got to try and find some balance somewhere. I mean, we do mostly still enjoy this hobby, and it is enjoyable for the most part. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sat playing games if we didn't like it.
Yeah, there's some definite positives. There's some great games out there.
Yeah,
and in a very real sense, we are in the golden age because we are at the very kind of edge of where gaming is. So we've still got all the old stuff. We can still go back and play all that if we want to, but we've got new stuff coming along as well. So we've got, in many respects, we've got the best of both worlds.
I think positive wise, we've had a lot of great single player games in the AAA space this year. Particularly, which
was not something I was expecting. If you'd asked me that a couple of years ago,
I was not expecting a particularly amazing year, and we've had some really good AAA games.
We've definitely had an amazing year, especially this last couple of weeks with Spider-Man.
Yeah. just Spider-Man.
Well, I just think the amazing Spider-Man. Sorry, I had to do that. I'm sorry.
But like the indie space is as good as it ever is, and I think we've reached a bit of a turning point. I think when it comes to the public's acceptance of, like, that we finally found a line for the public to go, whoa, wait, that's not right. You need to stop doing that, and had people come in and legislate because the game industry won't do itself. But I think overall that's becoming a positive outcome in the end.
I think it's going to run a little while longer yet, but I think public awareness is definitely a much higher level than it was even a year ago.
Yeah, and it's not even public awareness in sort of the I hate the video games kind of like weird soccer mum level. It's actual sort of, oh, okay, that practice in video games is not very good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. AAA video games. Yeah.
I thought we had him on for a minute.
Well, that'd be good. That'd be a good boost to your channel.
That'd boost views. I'd get at least 50 views then.
Exactly. I did a voice last week in the newscast. I can't remember. I was reading a statement of something, and I had Max on, and he said he just couldn't recognise my voice as being me at the end of the statement because I just got increasingly weird. I think I've got a wave of it, like just the bit on its own. I'll just send it to you. It just apparently doesn't really sound like me at all.
Oh, it'd be interesting.
But yeah, I think the games industry is, the negatives are the AAA industry is still being dicks. Companies are shutting down. EA still exist, but
it's funny actually because Grant and I were saying something just before we started, and we were talking about back in the day and the number of football games that were out there. and there were loads.
There's loads, wasn't there?
And you know, if you're into sports games, you would just, there were so many good sports games out there, and different companies took different approaches to doing football and hockey and all these different games. And then EA came along and sort of bought up all the rights, and basically everyone else died a death.
They monopolised most of it, and now they're just...
now they're just milking it for all it's worth. It's like when they deregulated the buses, and in my hometown we had all these bus companies come in and try and start up routes, and the company that was established cut its prices to the bone. All these guys disappeared, and then their prices went through the roof. It's that kind of approach, you know. You kill off your competition, and then you can do what the hell you like. And loot boxes seem to me to be an example of EA doing what the hell they like, and seemingly up until fairly recently getting away with it. I do think there are some green shoots, though. I think I agree with you guys. I think there's some positives to be drawn. I think Sony, in a way, Sony are almost a microcosm of the whole industry in a way, because there's positives and negatives within them. But I think the one thing that they are driving is this idea that single-player games are still viable, and more than viable. They're really popular, certainly amongst a certain group of gamers, and they can be catered for. Sorry, Grant.
Yeah, we need that because they will actively back single-player developers for X amount of time. If you look at how long The Last Guardian took to come out, I think it started development in
about
PS2
2009. I think it's 2009.
Yeah. 2009.
Well, that's when it was first announced at an E3.
Right. So, late sort of PS3, sort of PS3 mid-range. And they gave them nearly 10 years, or no, was it 7 years of development? It came out in 2016, didn't it?
Began development in 2007. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was 9 years between starting and finishing.
I mean, how many other companies would give a developer or publisher that 9 years to put a game out? I mean, they wouldn't, would they? No. But it's because they back and they believe in single player games, and they're not the only one. Obviously Bethesda do as well. And there are still a lot of people that love playing single player games. I do. I can't play multiplayer games because I'm old.
Well, the thing is, as you get older, that's what happens. I used to play a lot of online, and I don't so much now because as I get older, but I still want to play games.
I used to play a lot of Battlefield. Yeah, I just can't do it. My reaction.
No, my kid kicks my ass. My kid's 9. He kicks my ass at first-person shooters all day long, and I've got years of experience, or maybe, if I'm being honest, years of being crap. But even so, but as you get older, your tastes change, and the fact is that the demographic is moving in age. Gaming is getting older, and so there is an audience for that. Older, Not everybody has got hours and hours and hours to sink into Destiny. They can't just come.
Yeah. It's not an audience of 13-year-old boys anymore. Not exclusively, anyway. Although the things that everyone focus groups on might touch you up. I
think people outside of gaming still seem to think it is, but that's ignorance more than anything.
Yeah.
One of the problems that came up for me, though, and this was interesting in relation to single player games, and again this goes to where we think things are going moving forward. I was talking to a couple of friends of mine over the weekend. They came over to watch the boxing, and we were talking about games because they're both keen gamers. And one of them said something that I thought was really interesting. We were talking about single player games and how, in some respects, the AI in games doesn't feel any better than it did, say, 10, even 15 years ago in a lot of games. And he made the point that that's because a lot of the people working in that kind of development have moved over into other industries, like working for Google and people like that. So they will get paid more to work in those industries perhaps than working in gaming. So gaming has moved in another direction, and if you actually look at the AI, even in a lot of good single player games now, the AI, I don't know, I'm only speculating, but for me the AI doesn't look that great in a lot of games. And
it's not.
There's actually a very good channel. It's called AI in Games, funnily enough, and it's this guy who does a lot of very in-depth videos about this kind of thing that I recommend you watch, because I know what you mean. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of change, but there actually is. And when you watch some of them, particularly his Doom video that he did about a month ago,
Interesting.
then you can see that there's actually a lot of sort of difference in it.
Cool. I stand corrected.
Yeah. Well, I mean, initially I thought you were right because I know 2 AI developers, and neither of them work in the games industry. They work in other fields.
I do think that a lot. That, I mean, it could be that both's the case. I mean, AI probably is improving, but I do wonder how much it would have improved if maybe there weren't other industries pulling those developers away. Because,
having said that, go and look at the original Deus Ex. The AI in that was bloody awful.
Well, that's the other thing as well. We look back and we look through.
He's here somewhere. I'm under the table. You can't find me.
We do look back through rose-tinted glasses to some extent. We think that there's great AI in these games, and then we go back and we play them, and actually, you've got an NPC standing looking at a wall, not moving. Those kind of things. So,
when you look at things like Aliens, Colonial Marines, the AI around that, and how that was most of that was fixed with a typo. It wasn't completely fixed. The AI was still mostly shit, but so many of the problems people were having were fixed when there was one logic gate was a no rather than a yes, and they just changed that, and it was just a lot better. Apparently.
Crazy.
Yeah, go forward, not forward.
All right, and on that note, because that's quite a positive note, that was at least funny anyway.
Yeah.
I think we should probably wrap up there. So just quickly, Count, give me your final thoughts. Just wrap it up. I know we've pretty much been doing that anyway, but wrap it up for me. What's your final thought on this?
I'd like to think that gaming is improving. We've had a few years of companies taking the piss a little bit, but that seems... while we've had to have law enforcement people, like government people, get involved, I think overall there's a lot of positives to take away, and I think hopefully it's going to start improving slowly over the next few years, hopefully.
Cool.
Maybe I'm just being weirdly positive for a change.
Strange for you.
I know.
Fingers crossed, though. And Grant, what's your view on that?
Yeah, we're going through a bit of a transition period where there's pushback from gamers, and there's publishers trying to exploit us as gamers. And I think if we can get through this period, then there's hope for the gaming industry. I do remain positive still that the hobby will continue to develop in a positive direction, but I just hope we can cut through the bullshit.
Yep, and I would pretty much echo what you've both said. I think that there's definitely positives, there's green shoots there. There's always the old games, as I say, you can still go back and play them. They're not going anywhere, unless Nintendo gets their way.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of exploitation going on. I think that we do need to try and heal the rift or whatever it is between developers and gamers to some degree. We need to try and come together, and at the end of the day, a lot of the developers get into developing because they like games. A lot of them were gamers. So moving forward, I think we can improve things. I think things can get better. I think that we are going to see some changes as regards things like loot boxes. And, there are some great games out there, and you guys touched on indie. I think that some of the stuff that's coming out of the indie space is phenomenal and could teach the AAA industry a thing or two. So anyway, that's my final take. So last thing to do now is just to have you guys once again tell us where we can find you. So do you want to do that first, Count?
Okay, yep. I can be found on GameCast on YouTube. I do news videos, the odd review, a podcast, and the odd Let's Play. I give myself far too much to do, but that's fine. And I can be found on Twitter at Snowy Duffield, where you can find ramblings about a lot of weird things. A lot of geeky things, a lot of gaming things, and a lot of political opinions.
And Lego, probably.
Yes, yes. They've announced a Lego. It's like a wind turbine set, It's going to be like a meter tall, I think, roughly, and it's going to have an engine inside, so it actually turns.
Bloody hell.
That's going on my wish list.
And Grant, do you want to finally tell us where we can find you again?
Okay, so I'm on YouTube at Over the Edge, not the Pakistani game show. I'm the gaming channel. I don't know if it's still there, but a friend of mine.
Is that actually a thing? That's amazing.
Yeah, when I was first looking at the name, a friend of mine pointed out, "Oh, you've got a bit of a competition." He said what it was, and I thought, okay, it's not really competition, is it?
No, not not aiming at the same market necessarily.
And elsewhere, I'm on Twitter at Over the Edge YT, where I just ramble on about games, occasionally other stuff as well, but mainly games. I try and keep it locked, because I do have political opinions, but yes, I save them for special occasions.
And Discord.
And Discord.
Yeah.
Okay, so do go and check these guys out. They're well worth a watch. And then if you want to find me as well, you know where to find me. It's all going to be in the description down below. And if you're a regular, well, you've found us, so you know where I am. So I'm not going to go into that here. But do come over to Discord, because I've got my own Discord channel, and Count has also got his Discord channel with the GameCast crew. That's worth checking out. And that's it, really. I think we're done. And I will speak to you guys in the next one. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.